Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you haven't been here before. Today I'm going to be discussing a drug that is not in the United States and it's not approved in the United States. It's technically like a gray market supplement in the United States. It's called Semax, spelled S-E-M-A-X, and it is pretty much used in Eastern Europe and Russia. But before we get into the discussion, I just want to remind you, I am not a doctor. I am not a chemist. I am not certified in pretty much anything to do with medicine, and I don't want to lead anybody into the impression that I am. Everything I do is just me looking up stuff on the internet, and personal experience and all that sort of stuff. So, Semax, what is it? It's a drug composed of 7 amino acids that help to increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and this is also increased by things like lion's mane mushroom. Now, the thing that's interesting about Semax is that it is actually a nasal drop, and it was created to be given to people who just had a stroke, or just got a really bad brain injury, or any other thing that happens where somebody just got hit in the head. There's a 1% solution and a 0.1% solution that I'm aware of. So with Semax, it allows the brain essentially to have an increase in neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, potentially helping to recover better from certain issues and that sort of stuff. So let's get into it a little bit more. Let's give a case scenario to start. You just got a big concussion playing soccer. It's Eastern Europe, so let's go soccer. Someone ran into full speed with their head. You got knocked unconscious. The paramedics came and you came back to consciousness, and they administered this drop into your nostrils on the way to the hospital. Now, this drop can pretty quickly increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And why is that beneficial? If you just took damage to your brain, especially in the form of a concussion or a stroke, there's a lot of other types of damage. It would not work if you have a cancerous growth or something, most likely because it could potentially grow the cancer. When you get it administered through the nose, it will increase BDNF, like I said, and again, the reason that this will help is because your brain is now in a state of deterioration. There's a cascading effect in the brain where when one neuron dies, it kind of signals to all the other neurons as it snaps and breaks, which is what happens to the gelatinous-like substance of our brain. As the brain shifts and moves from things like a concussion, they can snap. The neurons can snap, and then I believe the chemical compound that is released is tau, and when it goes comes in contact with other neurons, it essentially signals these other neurons to die. And that is often why when you get a concussion, you don't notice how severe the symptoms are until hours, sometimes even a day later or more, because it's a cascading event. You can have the damage from those neurons in small amounts initially, and then it'll deteriorate and get worse. It's a cascading event. Kind of like getting hit really hard, but the bruise doesn't show up until later. When you get a concussion, some of the neurons broke, but it's a cascading event, and a lot of the neurons break later. If you introduce something, like I've talked about cerebral lysin in the past, which is an injection, typically intravenous, when it comes to being administered in hospitals. Again, oddly enough, in Eastern Europe and in Russia, it sounds like, although I believe there is some in Germany. I'm not going to get into that. The point is, it's not available in the United States. That's what impacts me the most, and that's honestly why I'm kind of upset that these aren't in the United States, and I don't really know why we don't have competitors for it in the United States, because this feels like a huge part of the pharmaceutical market that they could target, especially with everybody being terrified of CTE and long-term brain damage. So, if you're given this nasal drop, theoretically, it can help to stop the cascade. it can at the very least, it can attenuate some of the damage that is now occurring. So if your brain is producing more neurons and more growth signals, it can help to stop the cascade. Obviously, it can help to replenish the neurons as well. But if you get an immediate concussion, or if you administer the drug immediately after a concussion, theoretically you can help to prevent the breakdown, because now you've put in growth factors that tell your brain, for lack of a better way of thinking about it, it's like a switch. It's either deteriorating or growing. Granted, that's not at all how it is, because everything is in a sliding scale. It's kind of like losing fat and gaining muscle. You can do both at the same time technically, but it's a lot easier to explain like a switch. And so now let's say you just flip the switch and the brain is deteriorating. You just got the concussion and it's damaged and it's telling all the other neurons to die. You flip the switch and take the Semax, the nasal drops. Usually it's 1% for this case scenario, like the 1.0%. And BDNF increases. I think when they did studies on it, it was only a few minutes afterwards. And now you have these growth factors in your brain that can allow you to recover and potentially fend off some of the tau from reaching these chemical sites and help to prevent a lot of the damage, theoretically. I don't know if there's any way that we have been able, or people in general have been able to study this, because it's kind of complex. I mean, I guess you could do like studies where you're looking at a rat's brain at multiple points within a study after you give it damage. I don't know. That there's a lot of ethical questions that I have about how this was even created in the first place, and maybe that's why it's not in the United States. But in terms of allowing people to recover, it seems to be genuinely helpful. When you get a concussion and you take this for multiple days, it allows you to reach baseline at a much faster rate, much like cerebral lysin. But cerebral lysin has so many more growth factors. This is pretty much just BDNF. Which, not to say that's nothing, especially if you can get it quickly administered after a brain injury. But if you can keep that neurogenesis going and attenuate a lot of the damage, or help to recover neurons that, were just damaged and not fully deteriorated yet, that's pretty powerful. So those are pretty much the most common case scenarios, are concussion and stroke, and obviously other forms of TBI that are more serious, which technically still classify as concussion. But there's so many case scenarios that I don't want to say too much without having a full knowledge base of it. But other case scenarios when it's used a lot is actually anxiety, depression, and ADHD. Now, there is Semax that is 1%, and there's Semax that's 0.1%. And so Semax that's 0.1% is typically used in a more long-term fashion. Again, it's a nasal drop, and it's used for things like ADHD, depression, and anxiety. So because it increases neurogenesis, it often helps to decrease anxiety effects. This is actually pretty similar to how SSRIs work. SSRIs increase neurogenesis. A lot of people don't know that. It's funny, people always said that it was like a chemical imbalance thing. That was like the colloquial explanation of how SSRIs worked, but we've known for years that's not how it works, because your serotonin increases the day you take it, but symptoms don't reside typically until a few weeks to a few months after starting the medication. And so that's because of neurogenesis, the ability for your brain to grow new pathways and recover, as well as the fact that neurogenesis often just kind of makes you calmer as far as anxiety goes. And for depression, it allows you to grow more pathways, essentially to grow your brain. That's often why I see SSRIs in combination with therapy, as like that has been shown to be the most profound way to recover from depression, is combining something that increases your neurogenesis with therapy, essentially giving you the tools to recover and giving you the information to recover at the same time. So you know what to do with the building blocks that you're being given. If that makes sense, hopefully it does. That's how I usually explain it when I'm trying to explain it to somebody who's not really into pharmacology. And with Semax, it's kind of a similar theory. If you're increasing this brain-derived neurotrophic factor, then you're increasing neurogenesis, and therefore you could hopefully increase the potential for being able to overcome depression, at least attenuate depression and anxiety. And ADHD, it's been used for. Now, I don't know much about this specific category. It sounds like it helps to have a calming effect if you have a lot of the hyperactivity that comes with ADHD. And it seems that it helps to essentially build stronger pathways for developing habits that are important, because I know that a lot of people with ADHD have a hard time developing good habits, whether that's making sure you brush your teeth or take a shower, little things around the house, remembering to do your chores, often little things like that, until they get their, every few month random burst of energy where they make their house completely clean, or if they invite a friend over and they panic clean, which is really funny, because I don't even think that's an ADHD thing. I think everybody panic cleans when they know people are coming over. I do it to this day, and even if my house is already clean, I just I start getting nervous and cleaning up. But I digress. I'm getting really off topic. So that seems to be what the 0.1% is very useful for. Now there are a lot more case scenarios when where these drugs could potentially be used. I have heard of people buying them and bringing them to the United States. Most people that I know that have it, to be clear, this is online, so I don't know that they actually have it, but from what I've heard is that they keep it on hand in case they get a brain injury, like a concussion while doing a sport or in their daily lives, and that way they have something to help recover their brain a little bit. Granted, if it's a concussion, that's mild enough. Obviously, if you're unconscious, you're not taking it because that would be impossible. I've also heard the same thing about people who have cerebral liaison. And there's this other idea that for some reason, taking these medications is a neurocognitive enhancer. In the long term, technically, yes, it will neurologically be cognitive enhancing because it allows you to grow your brain more, so it allows you to learn more, and that is true to an extent. But in the short term, a lot of people don't realize this. Neurogenesis can make you really brain foggy. It can make you seem really kind of out of sorts. A lot of kids, when they're very young, are going through rapid amounts and massive amounts of neurogenesis as their brain develops, and they get spacey. And that's really normal. Being spacey when you're going through a large amount of neurogenesis, from everything I know, is very normal. So when a lot of people take Semax, they actually report getting really tired or otherwise kind of loopy or whatnot. Now, again, those are anecdotal reports. For all I know, they were taking Semax and it was just a nasal dropper full of water. I don't know. But I do think it's important to keep these in account, because they're some of the only English accounts that I can find. Besides a lot of general overviews, a lot of these things are in other languages because they're not in the United States. But if any of you guys know anybody in the pharmaceutical industry that thinks they could develop a drug that could help potentially decrease the amount of damage from a concussion or a stroke by using some of these growth factors, especially because this one's synthetic and it's not derived from pig brains like cerebral liaison is, that would be awesome. And I'd love to hear about it. And if anybody has just more information on that in general, or if they're actually developing the drugs right now, that would be so cool. Let me know down in the comments. But overall, Semax has great potential for treating stroke, brain damage from concussion or other injury, helping treat depression, anxiety, and ADHD. There have been a lot of anecdotal reports of it somehow making you better or smarter, or instantly better at work or cognitive work, which is what I was going to talk about a little bit ago. It's that it does technically in the long term, but in the short term it doesn't. It's not caffeine. It's not nicotine. It's not Adderall. A lot of people take it and they go, it's just like Adderall. It's so incredible. It's if you feel that way, you did not take Semax or you are having a very strong placebo effect. Nothing wrong with that. With the placebo effect, very much so wrong if you are ingesting a chemical that is not what you are consenting to. That's very dangerous. Don't do that. Obviously, I don't advise anybody go buy this chemical because it's not legal inside the United States. It's technically a gray market area because it's not even classified as a drug in the United States, so it's technically on the supplement market, but it is a drug. So in my opinion, I put it on gray market, like the same way that I would say SARMs are gray market. You're not going to get arrested for having it, but there's no quality assurance, and that's very scary. That's kind of like the weirdest category in the United States for sure. But like, as far as if you're getting stimulatory effects from it, that probably shouldn't be happening. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very fascinating chemical. If any of you guys know anything more about it, go ahead and drop some information in the comments. And if anybody knows any pharmaceutical industry executives that would want to talk to me about developing a drug that could help after brain injury or stroke, let me know, because I really want these drugs to be developed in the United States. Obviously, I have my own personal reasons. I've gotten some pretty hefty brain trauma in the past that kind of completely altered my life trajectory, and if I had these drugs back in the day, like in the United States, and like I was treated with them, I really wonder how different my life would have turned out. Also, there's the potential that we could maybe attenuate people's decline into CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or their descent into Alzheimer's or dementia. I don't think there's any studies in this for Semax particularly, but that's still a really cool idea, especially if you can attenuate it even by a few months. That's a few more months of cognitively aware living that you can get, and that's pretty cool. If you only have, if you're 82, you're thinking you might not make it past like 84, but you're starting to cognitively decline. 6 months of cognitive awareness longer, that's a huge life changer. I say that because cerebral lysin did have some data that showed it decreased the descent, like as far as how fast dementia and Alzheimer's took hold of people. And I really wonder if it would help with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, especially because that is induced by a lot of brain trauma, especially subconcussive incidents. But anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. If you liked it, go ahead and like it. If you didn't, I understand. Give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel if you like these type of videos about everything health, fitness, drugs in terms of pharmacology. I typically don't talk about illegal substances unless I'm warning people about them. If you have any of that information like I was talking about before, comment down below. I would love to hear it. And that's pretty much going to do it for me today. So have a great one.